longest short week ever. It has been a long week, and so we're glad that you chose to come and start your Friday with us with our quarterly Blue League Talks. I'm Pam Swain with Oxford Lafayette County Chamber of Commerce, and we are very fortunate to partner with Chick-fil-A and the Office of Outreach for these quarterly events where we have the opportunity to bring in a speaker that we know is going to address topics that are very important to you in your professional life, even sometimes in your personal life. And so we're excited this morning to bring Alex here to be with you. Alex and I were just talking, and he's originally from Clarksdale, but he lived in California for 10 years, and he's glad to be back in his home state of Mississippi and here in Oxford. When he was in California, he worked for 4 years in the technology space before transitioning into corporate finance, and he's been with Blue Street Capital for the past 6 years, and he currently serves as the VP of Southeast and specializes in financing technology projects. He moved back here 3 years ago with his wife and his 3 children. He's got 3 little ones, 3 years old, a year and a half, and 5 months maybe now. Yeah. So, God bless you. That's a lot. That's a lot to handle. And his office is located here on campus at Insight Park. Right. And so we know that he gets a lot out of that wonderful space that the university has available to folks like Alex at Blue Street Capital. So Alex is going to tell you a little bit how his format is going to go today. So it's going to be a little interactive, and we're going to need you to wake up and be a part of his presentation some. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex, and I look forward to everything you have to share.
Good deal. Yeah, so it's a little bit different format. It's going to be more like a TED-Talk format. If anybody ever watches TED-Talks, they're all pretty much the same. They're under 20 minutes, and it'll be short and sweet. It's going to be an idea. I mean, TED Talks are big on an idea worth sharing. So this is an idea worth sharing, and at the end, there will no doubt be questions. So I'd like to engage kind of in a Q&A. And I'll go ahead and get started. So who here has ever noticed that they're more productive leading up to a big vacation, right before you go on vacation, right? Yeah, me too. Have you at least noticed that you're a little bit more focused and a little bit more organized right before you leave to make sure you get everything done? So for me, I want to get all of my work done before I go on vacation. I want to get everything super organized, super buttoned up so I can relax on vacation and not have to worry about work. Our CEO, Dave Rhodes, discovered this years ago. So he actually takes vacations pretty regularly, and it's always been a trigger to refocus and reorganize. He discovered that his employees were more productive leading up to big vacations, which made him question how we work. So, the day before vacation miracle. This is actually a quote by Gary Keller. He's the founder and CEO of Keller Williams, which is the largest real estate agency in the world by agent count. He co-wrote a book that many of you have probably read. It's called The One Thing. He co-wrote that book. It's a business book on productivity. That's going to be what I want everyone to derive from this talk today. It's on productivity. And he co-wrote that book with my cousin, Jay Papazan. Jay is from New Albany, Mississippi, right up the road. Jay says that, actually Gary Keller says, he says that the only difference in the day before vacation and any other day is your discipline to plan your day and attack it with everything you've got. He says that if you tackle your day with this same determination, you will get twice as much done in half the time. So this talk's not going to be about vacations. Sounds like it is, but what I want you to think about is, what if this could be the way you worked all the time? What if every day was the day before vacation miracle? For me, it is. And I'm going to tell you a story, our company story, about why this is so, and I think you'll find it very interesting. And I think that it will help you discover how the workday can be rethought and how you can realize better productivity. So I want you to imagine for yourself just a second. Imagine yourself in a typical American office job working a typical 9 to 5. You got to be in the office for minimum 8 hours. And let's say it's about 1:30 in the afternoon. And you've recently come back from lunch. You had maybe fried chicken. You're tired. You've already been grinding it out all morning on the phones, emailing, doing paperwork. And out of nowhere, the owner of the company calls a mandatory all-hands meeting. As everyone starts to file into the conference room, he starts by saying that immediately following this meeting, this short meeting, everyone can go home for the rest of the afternoon. Do whatever it is that you want to do. And he further explains that over the next 90 days, so the remainder of the summer, we'll be doing an experiment where we'll be trying to get all of our work done in 5 hours. So your minimum time that you're going to be in the office is 5 hours, not 8 hours. So for me, this is what actually happened 3 years ago. So the owner that called that mandatory meeting is the CEO that I report directly to. And he actually had a lot of confidence in us. I don't think anybody in the room believed that this was even feasible or possible or a good idea, but he had a lot of confidence in us. He said, there's a lot of wasted time during the day. He says, all that I ask is you get in the office a little bit early and plan your day. Just be super focused. So right at 8 o'clock, get on the phones, get to work, start your work. And I don't want to see any chitter-chatter, try to eliminate social media, long coffee breaks, just focused work for 5 hours, and at 1 o'clock, everybody can go have lunch and leave for the rest of the day if you get all your work done. So he also said that he had a lot of confidence in us that we would actually get our work done in 5 hours because he believed that time is our most valuable asset. So he believed that giving us our time would be more valuable than giving us a pay raise. He did essentially give us a pay raise if you think about it. So those of us that were kind of workaholics like myself working 8, 9, 10 hours a day, he effectively gave us a double per hour pay raise. After the 90-day experiment was completed, we took a very detailed look at our results, both our KPIs and our revenues. I'm going to share those results with you in a little while, and I think you'll find them surprising. But first I want to touch on 2 key ideas. How many hours do we actually work, and what happens when you work less hours? All right, how many hours do we work in America? So if you're a salary worker, you work 40-hour work weeks, perhaps, if you're working a 9 to 5. No, not according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Says that 97% of salary workers in the U.S. work more than 40 hours. On average, salary workers work 49 hours a week. And 25% of us, I would call workaholics, working well over 60 hours a week. It is not uncommon to hear people saying that they work 90 to 100 plus hours a week. All right, so this is not uncommon in our current culture. But where did the 8-hour workday come from in the first place? Where did the 8-hour workday, this 40-hour work week that is kind of the benchmark? It came about during the Industrial Revolution. So machines and assembly lines started to make companies exponentially more productive. Cars, for example, used to be handmade before the assembly line. It would take a whole factory of workers to make a car in a day. So it was no surprise that in 1926, Henry Ford announced to the world that he was taking Ford Motor Company to a 40-hour work week. And he was going to move it to 5 days a week. This was a time when most factory workers were working anywhere from 10 to 16-hour days, most of which were working 6 days a week. This was a problem back then because in 1910, there was a publication by the American Institute of Social Services that estimated that over 536,000 factory workers were being killed or permanently disabled on the job. That's in 1 year. That's when the population of the U.S. was about 92 million. So to put that into perspective, that's about 0.5% of the population of the entire country being killed or permanently disabled on the job in just in 1 year. Now, Fast forward to today, and you can see that technology has advanced greatly, allowing us to work far less hours. But do we? We already know that we work way more hours than Henry Ford's 40-hour work week. So technology can make us massively more productive, or it can enable us to massively waste time. So before I show you the results of what we saw from moving from our minimum 8-hour day to 5 hours, I want to show you something that was kind of interesting that happened during the recession. So everybody remembers what happened in 2008. There is no surprise. No one is shocked by the fact that hours plummeted. We saw more people being laid off, companies going under than we've ever seen. But something curious happened. Productivity during this time spiked. We saw the fastest growth in productivity in the United States that we've ever seen. And it was during the period, during the toughest time. I ripped this right off the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I initially thought that perhaps people were putting in like 16-hour days to get all their work done, but I don't believe that's what happened, because the average weekly hours stayed fairly flat during this time. It even dropped a little bit. I believe that what happened more than likely was people were forced to manage their productivity instead of their time. I don't think when people saw everyone getting laid off around them, wondering if they were going to keep their job, if they were just sitting in the office for 8 hours, just to sit in the office for 8 hours. I believe they were really focused on the most important tasks, and they were super organized, and they were working pretty hard, those that were left in the workforce. I remember that I certainly was at that time. Now, what happens when you work less hours? So at the end of the 90-day experiment, we took a very close look at our KPIs. These are key performance enhancers, things that we can track very easily. Number of outbound phone calls, number of applications processed, number of inbound proposals. Our revenues increased, our KPIs went up by 23%. Our revenues increased by 22% in 3 months of working 5 hours instead of 8. So this graph represents Blue Street Capital from July 2016 to June 2017. This is the first year that we tried this experiment. You can see as revenues go up, our hours, we figured out how to work to, we weren't able to drop our hours from 8 to 5 immediately. We had to figure out how to free up time and get that done. This chart looks almost identical to this. It's almost an identical trend. So I now know that I can be more productive in less hours. I know that I can. How is this possible? So I'm going to touch on that in just a second, but I want us to think about one very obvious thing. I just freed up 15 hours a week. I freed up 15 hours a week. If I'm working 5 to 6 hours a day, that's 50 to 60 hours per month, 570 to 720 hours per year I now have to dedicate to other things. That is 90 traditional 8-hour days stacked on top of each other. Per year, I can do whatever I want with that time, if I'm focused and I'm getting my work done. I'm talking about a motivator to actually get my work done. So what would you do if you had 15 extra hours or 3 months of extra time to dedicate to whatever you'd like? So I personally started to reinvest my time in my family, spend more time with my wife and kids. I started to get healthier. I can now exercise more, read more, work on, I read a lot more. I can focus on personal development and even perfect my trade at work. I got to spend more time on my hobbies and interests, such as improving my Spanish fluency, getting into new hobbies like gardening and woodworking, just to name a few. So I want to touch on how this is possible, because all this extra time that I have and I dedicate to all these other things, I'm still more productive at work. So I want to touch on a concept called time constraints. So the famous British historian C. Northcote Parkinson famously quoted that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So think about that. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Worded this way by the famous business author, Tim Ferriss, from the 4-Hour Workweek. He said it this way: a task will swell in perceived importance and complexity in relation to the time allotted for its completion. It's the magic of the imminent deadline. So that's really good. I can resonate with that. I want to talk about this guy for a second, Stephen Arstall. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Tower Paddleboards. He wrote a book called The 5-Hour Workday. He's infamous for freezing up on the TV show called Shark Tank. This is a picture of him. He literally just forgot his pitch in front of the sharks and completely froze deer in the headlights. But he still was able to walk away with over $150,000 investment from Mark Cuban, and his company's doing very well. The reason I mentioned Stephen Arstall is because he led the way for us to implement this into our work culture. So our CEO, he's an avid surfer. Shortly after he read an article about Tower Paddleboard moving to 5 hours, he drove down to San Diego and met with Stephen Arstall, and he witnessed the 5-hour workday in action. He didn't believe it, but he really liked the idea. He was intrigued. And this is a really good quote from one of Stephen Arstall's employees after they implemented the 5-hour workday. He said that because of the technology and information we have access to today, we can now be more productive, but we will still stretch out our days to make it look like we're busy all day to our boss. He further explains that if you put a time constraint on the work that needs to get done, that you actually rise to the occasion and you get more done. And that really resonates with me, because not only have I lived out the positive effects of working shorter hours, but getting more done and being more productive, there are also people that have dedicated their lives to researching the benefits of working less and resting more. So I want to talk about Alex Payne. So some of you may have read some of his books. He's a famous business author. He wrote books like Rest, The Distraction Addiction, and he's in the process of writing a book right now called Shorter, which is about how companies are redesigning the workday and reinventing the future. So he's interviewed our CEO and myself for this new book. He's also interviewing companies all over the world that are experimenting with different versions of a shorter work week or a shorter work day. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. He actually discovered this himself. The reason he's dedicated himself to researching this is he discovered this when he was on a sabbatical, close to burnout. He took a sabbatical, and he found that the quality of his work was much better when he had no pressure to produce. He actually found that he did more work in a shorter amount of time. I thought that was really interesting. And he would have called himself a workaholic prior to this discovery. Interestingly, he is revealing that this is a growing global trend. Companies figuring out how to shorten their working hours in order to increase productivity and have their employees healthier as a result. So some of you are perhaps some of the first people to hear about this. I doubt you've heard a lot about this prior to this talk. Now, there are a lot of ways you can go about freeing up time, but I want to share with you some of the most impactful things that we implemented to be exponentially more productive. I think this is what y'all want to hear. So this is how we were able to rapidly free up time at Blue Street. So we eliminated the biggest time wasters first. The obvious are long lunch breaks. All right, we eliminated long coffee breaks and water breaks in the break room. Those are gone. Social media, online browsing and shopping, personal calls and texting while on the job, gone. That's not part of our work culture. Studies show that 28% of the day is wasted in multitasking alone. We used to think multitasking was doing two different things at once, but multitasking is actually switching back and forth between lots of tasks all through the day. And all that switching time and all that lag and focus, trying to refocus back on all those tasks, conservatively adds up to 28% of the day wasted. That gets us under 6 hours from an 8-hour day alone. combined with advanced time blocking techniques and eliminating distractions, you have a 5-hour day that blows most 8 to 9 hour days out of the water in productivity. So I've basically come full circle back to Gary Keller and my cousin Jay Papazan, who they deploy these exact same tactics at Keller Williams. And they write about these in the book, The One Thing, principally time blocking, eliminating multitasking, and eliminating useless distractions. And I will close with this final thought. Why should we all care? So there's another implication here other than just productivity. There's a lot of science out there right now on the correlation between happiness and work productivity, most famously outlined in the TedTalk and book called The Happiness Advantage. They call this area of research happiness psychology. This is actually a huge growing area of research. This is an area of thought and research that tells us that when we are spending more time on our passions, our most important relationships, like our family, our health, we are happier, we are healthier, and as a result, we're more productive at work. All right, so my charge to you is to apply some of these principles to your work. All right, I know it doesn't have to be the 5-hour workday, obviously. Find something that works. Put some type of time constraint on your work and try to put some of these principles in play. And now don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you will be working less hard. Like, you're going to be working harder because you have to be more focused and more organized. But the side effect is you free up a ton of time, and I want you to reinvest that freed up time into people and things that you truly love. And I believe that we can all be more productive and live the way we want to live as a result. After all, time is our most valuable asset.